quarries past?
Nope. That one, thank you. This is a state historical marker at the corner of Main and Factory Streets, and besides being known as the blackboard capital of America, another claim to fame and historical significance for Slatington is that it was home to the first school slate factory in the United States. It began operation in 1847 by William Roberts and Owen Jones. I'm not going to get into the entire story of how slate was discovered in our area, but two Welshmen were on a journey, one of them being William Roberts. Slate was later discovered on the property of Owen Jones, which we mentioned a few times already today. A quarry opened in 1845, became known as the Tunnel Quarry, and that was located at to the east of Welshtown Road, just outside of Slatington. After Jones established this quarry with the help of Roberts and Robert McDowell, he returned to Wales to fetch his family. And 2 years later, as I said, he, along with Roberts, established the first school slate factory in the country along Trout Creek. We're next going to talk about Fane Semmel. Fane was born on April 11th, 1835 in Lehigh County and was the son of John Semmel. The family's roots can be traced back to Frankfurt on Main in the German state of Hesse. At the age of 11, he started out on his own, and by the age of 17, he apprenticed under Peter Sipe of Sipestown for carriage making, where he continued for 2.5 years. He then relocated to the Diepertsville section of Heidelberg Township and opened his own shop, remaining there for 2 years. He then went to Sagersville in 1857 and established a shop and continued at that location until January 1st, 1873, when he moved to Slatington and opened up his own shop at number 4 Factory Street. He purchased a large lot, including a fine stone barn, which he purchased from George Kern. He converted the building into a factory and produced carriages, light and heavy wagons, and sleighs. The business was known as Semmel and Knecht. James Knecht previously manufactured carriages in a stone building in Lower Slatington beginning in 1869 and continuing until 1872. Semmel later erected a new frame factory at the rear of the property and converted the stone barn into storerooms. The business was successful and reached into the surrounding counties and lasted for 40 years. In his biography, it was noted that his coaches and carriages were a very superior quality and by their worth recommended themselves to the public. Fane was married twice, first in 1857 to Maria Mathara of Lehigh County, and had 6 sons and 2 daughters. Maria later died, and Fane married again to L.J. Hankey of Northampton County, and they became parents of 7 children. Apparently, Fane was spending more time at home than in his carriage shop. Fane was a member of the Lutheran Church, and his second wife was a member of the Reformed Church. It was noted that Fane was a prominent Republican, as were many people in Slatington at this time, and was an influential citizen, serving 2 terms on Borough Council. It was said that he used the weight of his influence on the side of progress and public improvement. He was a charter member of the Vigilant Fire Company as well. An interesting tidbit also noted in his biography was that in their parlor at his home, there was an old spinning wheel used for spinning flax, which was brought here from Germany by his ancestors over 100 years ago. And it should be noted that his bio was published in 1894, so that gives you an idea of how old that wheel was. The inscription on the wheel, in fact, said it was manufactured in 1753 in Baden, Germany. Wonder whatever happened to that wheel.
I do have to do.
You do?
My sister-in-law has it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she was Diane Semmel, and she married my brother Richard, and she has this.
Great, okay. Thank you for that update. Upon Fane's death in 1910, his son Palmer succeeded his father in his business along with his brother Walter. Palmer previously learned the business from his father after Palmer attended the American Business College in Allentown. One altruistic endeavor that Palmer undertook occurred in the late 1930s, which was operating Santa's repair shop in Slatington. He would receive old toys collected by members of the Slatington Women's Club, fix them free of charge, and have Santa distribute them to the less fortunate children of Slatington. Another interesting note about Palmer is that he was a notary public. The Semmel brothers ran the carriage shop until the introduction of the automobile, when they went by the old adage, if you can't beat them, join them, and they opened up a gas station, which I'm sure we'll discuss next year when we cover the 300 block of Main Street. Walter died in 1948, but Palmer lived a long life and died in 1976. One of the more interesting business owners in the area was Peter McConaughey. Relax, ladies, I did not say Matthew McConaughey. This was McConaughey. While McConaughey is Irish, McConaughey is Scottish, and he did not fit the usual pattern of Welsh people coming over to Slatington to work in the slate industry, although you may be familiar with another Scotsman in town who impacted Slatington, Robert McDowell. Peter was born in Perth, Scotland. He came to America with his parents when he was just 4 years old in 1871. His parents were Edward and Jane McLean McConaughey. He married Emma Peter. Together they had one child, Edward McConaughey, in 1890, but sadly he died at the age of 4 in 1894. During the mid-1920s, Emma served on the school board. Peter had a sister, Jenny, born in the United States in 1872, and she married Siles Everett. One of their children was Arvonia Everett, who worked from 1961 to 1964 as a waitress at Henwick's restaurant uptown, which maybe you remember her or recognize the name. Before that, she owned and operated the Evans restaurant in Slatington from 1938 to 1948. Now getting back to Peter, for many years his father Edward owned and operated the machine shop on Factory Street, and it was noted that this was the first machine shop for general repairs in Slatington. An article in the Slatington News from 1877 indicated that his machine shop, formerly located at the school slate factory of Mr. J.D. Emick Jr., was being moved into quarters adjoining the mantle factory of the Lehigh Slate Company, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. It was noted that he was now associated with Justice Moyer, a practical machinist, and coupled with the well-known ability of McConaughey, renders them a strong team. The business would now be known as McConaughey and Moyer, and they are prepared to do all kinds of machine work and repairs. In March of 1882, a Slatington News article indicated that Edward began erecting a new 30-foot by 50-foot machine shop adjoining the current foundry, and that a double upright 12-horsepower engine will be installed to run the machinery. Edward ran the business until 1891, when Joseph Custard succeeded him and ran the business for 3 years, at which time Edward's son Peter became the proprietor. However, to further confuse things, the Slatington News reported that in June 1889, former Chief of Police of Allentown, Mr. Bieber, had leased a machine shop formerly operated by Edward McConaughey. The paper indicated that Mr. Bieber has large experience in the business and has splendid business tact. His business partner was a Mr. Trexler, who was also a police officer and served under Bieber. In 1896, according to the Sanborn maps, the name of the business was C. Beers Machine Shop, and by 1902, the maps notate that the business as formerly owned by C. Beers. At one time, the business was known as the Union Foundry and Machine Works, and also Peter McConaughey and Sons. McConaughey specialized in steam engines and quarry machinery. You can imagine with the number of quarries and their output during this time that I'm sure McConaughey had a very lucrative business. You can see by his business ad in the Slatington News, he dealt in hoisting engines, steam pumps, and specialized in steam drills. He also kept quarry fittings and castings on hand constantly. By 1914, as the slate industry contracted and the auto industry expanded, the bulk of McConaughey's business was automobile repairs, as by October 1913, there were 90 automobiles in Slatington. I don't know how they got that number or where it came from, but somebody counted automobiles. One of the things I found most interesting about Peter McConaughey was his interest in affiliation with and participation in the local music scene in Slatington. His obituary indicated he was one of the organizers of the Slatington Band. An article in the March 16, 1915 Allentown Leader indicated that the premier minstrels would be holding a two-night performance for the benefit of the Town Clock Fund. I'm not sure what the Town Clock Fund was all about, but the article indicated that Peter was on the board of this organization and listed him as one of the members of the performing orchestra. 10 years later, in 1925, a similar article noted that Peter was an instructor for the drum corps Knights of Friendship. He was affiliated with the Knights of Pythias as well, and in 1925 was chairman of the local chapter of the organization. The Order of Knights of Pythias is an international, non-sectarian fraternal order formed in 1864 and was the first fraternal order in the country to be chartered by an act of Congress. The center of the order are the ideals of loyalty, honor, and friendship. Today, the order supports our military by sponsoring dances and fundraising events and does charitable work. Peter suffered a heart attack shortly before midnight on Saturday, September 15, 1934, at his home at 24 Factory Street in Slatington, and died a few minutes later after being stricken, according to a report in the Slatington News. His wife, however, continued to live on Factory Street. On February 13, 1950, however, a fire broke out and consumed McConaughey's former factory building on Factory Street. Damage was estimated at $10,000. Newspaper accounts noted that only a portion of the building was being occupied at the time, and that was by a chemical refinishing outfit owned by Matthew Meager of Allentown. Unfortunately, Mrs. McConaughey's sedan was destroyed in the fire, and a nearby garage was scorched. But she was away vacationing in Florida in the middle of winter, so I'm not sure if anyone felt sorry for her. 5 years later, however, on December 26, 1956, Emma McConaughey died at the age of 87. Next, we're going to move on to the large stucco building that many of you are familiar with.
Robert, where was this McConaughey building in relation to the building that's still down there that they had in it?
I believe it was going up Factory Street.
Up to
I
the
believe,
main?
yes.
Was it there when we were growing up? No.
I don't think so, no. Or maybe shortly after, yeah.
I don't remember. Don't you? He doesn't remember.
Yeah,
It
it's
didn't
on
exist,
the,
right?
It was farther up, closer to Main Street. Also, the clock fund. You said it was
Yeah.
1915?
I believe, roughly.
Anyone know where there was
Yeah.
a clock in Slatington?
I never, heard of it.
At the top of the high school. When the high school was
Oh,
built,
okay.
there was no clock.
Okay.
1916, they put a clock.
That makes sense. Thank you. Okay. So as I was saying, the large stucco building at the bottom of Factory Street was for years Charles H. Mantz oil and coal business. Charles Henry Mantz Sr. began selling and delivering coal in 1929 and operated it out of his home at 828 Main Street. In the early 1950s, he purchased a building on Factory Street, and his son Charles H. Jr. worked for his father during the summers and full-time upon graduating high school. In 1964, upon the death of his father, Charles Jr. took over ownership of the business. Charles Jr.'s son, Richard C. Mantz, worked summers also at the business, just like his father, and when Charles Jr. died in 1990, Richard took over ownership of the business. The business expanded over the years, adding fuel oil and kerosene to its product line in addition to coal, and expanded its truck fleet as well. The building dates back to 1859 and was erected for the manufacturing of slate products and was originally used by the Lehigh Slate Company and known as Lehigh Slate Company Mantle Factory. Mantles, blackboards, electrical slate, and more were manufactured in the facility. Some of the largest machinery was brought here from Vermont for the factory. In 1879, two men with the last names of Murray and Donnan leased the building. The Slatington News noted that, quote, the factory and machinery have been given a thorough cleaning and overhaul. It went on to say that, quote, the firm is composed of good men who are old hands at the business, thoroughly understanding it and will push it along to its full capacity. The article concluded by saying the factory is among the best in the Lehigh region. Lehigh Slate Company operated the factory until 1900. From 1902 to 1906, the factory was operated under the name Pennsylvania National Slate Blackboard Company by Howard Dahm, proprietor. After laying idle for 5 years, the factory became the property of John and Morris Bachman, and traded under the name Pennsylvania Blackboard Company, and produced, you guessed it, mostly blackboards, and employed 10 people. Their sister, Mrs. Howard Dahm, owned the property, and eventually the mantle factory was operated by Walter Bachman, and later by his children, John, Morris, and Ida, and operated as the Pennsylvania Natural Slate Blackboard Company. There's a lot of long names with that company. Lastly, we're going to talk about E.F. Snyder Slate Sinks, 1908, Moore and Snyder. Elmer F. Snyder operated this business located to the east of the Lehigh Slate Company building for a time during the early part of the 20th century. Elmer was born in Linport on the 8th of January in 1869, and at some point made his way to Slatington with a residence in the 300 block of Main Street, according to census records. In 1901, the aforementioned Howard Dahm erected a stock house to the east of the mantle factory, but rented out the building to Elmer in 1903, who equipped the building with machinery for making sink tops. Shortly thereafter, Elmer apparently had a partner in the business, as it was known as Moore and Snyder Slate Sinks, but by 1913, the business was just known as E.F. Snyder Manufacturing of Slate Sink Tops. We could not find any information on this Moore fellow, and not much is known about Snyder's business either. However, early on, the company had 4 employees, and besides producing slate sink tops, it was noted in 1923 that the company was manufacturing slate laundry tubs as well. Elmer passed away on the 24th of October, 1951, and at the time was living in Moore Township, Northampton County. It was interred at the Fairview Cemetery in Moorestown. Hope you've enjoyed this tour of Factory Street.
Building this Lehigh Slate, you know, for history buffs like his North we gotta hang on to that. You know, buildings in slating that don't last long, and if you're a history buff, you know, that's the only slate building I know of, manufacturing building left in the area. We had actual school slate. When was that fire, David?
79, I think it, 79, I think it was.
So, but this is the last one. And then you can see quarters, but you can't see slate factories. So we gotta hang on to that guy.
Well, the issue of that building is right now, I think, pretty tenuous in that I'm not sure when my sister-in-law sold the business after my brother's death to, I can't think of his first name, his last name was Smith, who only owned it for about 5 years. I don't know if she still owns it or if she doesn't, or if it's now owned by OHL of Lehighton. But I think to anyone other than local historians and people in this area, I think it's my feeling is that it's pretty close to being demolished.
What's amazing to me, Ken, is that building is lasting.
Exactly.
Brian, why is that building lasting?
Somebody put a metal roof like you wanted.
No, forget the roof. I'm talking about the walls.
Nice job. Thanks.
But there are no old buildings like that around.
That's the, as far as I know, that is the oldest existing business from our historical perspective. That's
The other
the
thing,
last one.
Robert talked about Owen Jones and Roberts, that were the first slate guys in the area. We have a great grandson, Owen Jones here. So we can be proud of that history too. Right, Brian? Brian Reed.
Are there any other questions about the presentations that you would like to know about? Well, I'm happy to see all of you here today. I know the committee is too, and we thank you for coming out and supporting our committee. I just would like to share a few items with you. In the fall, we plan to have a cemetery walk about the Catholic cemetery here located in Slatington. It will be held here, right, Robert? at 2 o'clock. I think it's September 21st, but we will have a write-up about it in the Gazette for sure, and also on the Facebook, I think you said, right. Another thing I'd like to share with you is that when we had the Welshmen visit last year in July, I tried to keep in contact with them throughout the year. And fortunately, I got a Christmas card in February from them. Because they were so busy, which I can understand. They're younger than we are and they have children and jobs. And finally, they had asked me if we would consider Slatington be a sister city somewhere over in Wales. Now, if you know the history about the Welsh, where they came from over there, it's up in northern Wales. I'm going to have to wait to see what city they want to give us. But it was comical that in February I got a Christmas card. Of course it was in Welsh, and I don't know Welsh. I'm not Welsh, I'm Pennsylvania, German, and Austrian, but maybe for some of you would have known some of the Welsh words. I just wanted to share that with you. Also, I did send my book to the printer about the Berksey. And this book will be Berksey Memories. This will be memories that I collected from the people that attended the Berksey reunion. These people rode the Berksey to Slatington High School from 1900 to April 1949. Now these will be memories. Now remember, these people that gave me their memories, they're up in years, 80s, 90s. Yes.
We were at the funeral for
I wanted to go, yes.
Day.
How was it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I shouldn't, maybe I'm going to brag now, so bear with me. When we did, the Slatington had a history committee in 1989, and Tim and I were on that committee. And this just came to me because she had passed away. And I said to Tim, I always knew Violet was intelligent, but then when I read she was first in her class at high school here in valedictorian, she came in on the Berksey. And if you buy the book, her write-up to me is just excellent. A person her state of her age, 96 she was when she passed away. So that's remarkable to me. And she just wrote that up for me about 3 years ago. And anyhow, and she also was first in her nursing class when she was a nurse. And anyhow, when she got the 1989 book, and I wasn't thinking at the time, but I just thought about this because she had passed away and she had given me this write-up about the Berksey. She says, I didn't realize how good this book was, she says, was going to be the 1989 book. And to me, that is a very good compliment because coming from Violet, she certainly was a brilliant person, I felt. And I didn't know at the time that she, was first in her class and first in her nursing school. But yeah, as well, I wanted to come to that, but I had to be here today, I was torn. Well, thank you for sharing that. And is there anything else that any of you would like to share or that you're interested in that the History Committee could do or something? Okay. Another thing. What? Oh yes, back there on the table, there are membership forms. If you'd like to become a member, please help yourself. We are trying to get a museum together. All the money that we get, we put in a fund. We don't touch that money, only except for the things that we buy, like the cemetery signs and that, and we don't touch the money. That is in there for our coming museum. So you know that. I think we have in it right now about $6,000. And hopefully it will continue to grow with the sales of the books and that we have. Mike, you are also doing books, right? How's that coming along?
Yeah, for a number of years, I've been doing research on Norman Smith, who was the namesake of Smith Hall. There's going to be a publication out sometime in the future, I can't tell you when, about the history of Norman Smith, what he did for the Slatington community, and of course, included in that is also the history of Smith Hall as well. I was approached last winter to try to compile some information on the Slatington Rotary basketball tournament as well. So there might be something forthcoming about the Rotary basketball tournament in conjunction with the Rotary Club. when they held their tournament this year.
Thank you, Mike. I know you're working diligently on that Smith Hall book, and I'm looking forward to that book because I can relate to that building because we attended there and we had classes there. Another thing, too, we don't really realize how rich our history is, and I wasn't really thinking about it either until we're doing all these businesses and that. But one thing our area, and we can all take pride in this because we're part of it, that Slatington was known as the capital, blackboard capital of the country, and also the Berksey. There's no place else that I've researched that I could find a train carrying students to high school for that period of time, or even one train. So that's amazing. That's a rich thing that I just thought about, that it has all to do with education. So we can really be proud of that we live in an area that really puts education first, takes a good part of that. So I'd like to thank all of you again for coming. Also, please help yourselves to some water and snacks. Take them along home. If it's out there, please take it home. But I'm so grateful that you all could come and share with us our rich history. Thank you very much. Hope to see you again.